Today is Friday, August 26th, and you should be reading from Isaiah 20 through 22, also 1 Corinthians chapter 2. As we're traveling through Isaiah, we see a lot of prophecies against nations, against people, and here's what's going to happen as a result of rebellion, a result of sin. We start off today's chapter, a short chapter against Egypt and Cush, and yet actually yesterday we also talked about prophecies against Egypt and against Cush. So next in that the next chapter, in chapter 21, he goes on to Babylon, and it looks like if you were looking at a map of these people that he's prophesying against, he's kind of just circling around and pointing to different places and saying, here's what's going to happen to you, nation. Here's what's going to happen to you, nation. And he's kind of circling around, and he comes to Jerusalem, his people, in chapter 22. And he has this prophecy against Jerusalem. But again, as a father to the nations, a father to his own people, he gives them some hope. But first of all, he prophesies against them, and he says several things about them. He says, you saw the walls, they were broken. You counted the buildings in Jerusalem. You built a reservoir between the two walls. And he's talking about, here's all the things that you did. But then he says in 22 verse 11, he says, but you did not look to the one who made it, or have regard for the one who planned it long ago. And he's talking about himself. God is talking about himself. You didn't look to me. You didn't bring glory to me. You look to what you have done. Look what you can bring glory to your own self and honor and build yourselves up. And God is a jealous God. He created us to worship him. That is the Father's heart. He wants us to be people who worship him. His people. He draws to himself to bring glory to himself because he deserves it. You should be living to worship him. At the end of chapter 22 here, we finish it out. He says, I will drive this guy, Eliakim, he's talking about. He says, I will drive him like a peg into a firm place. He will become a seat of the honor for the house of his father. This sounds like a good thing. Sounds good. He continues and says, all the glory of his family will hang on him. Its offspring and its offshoots, all its lesser vessels, from the bowls to all the jars. Sounds pretty good, promising for this guy Eliakim. Then he says in the closing of this chapter, he says, in that day, declares the Lord Almighty, the peg will be driven into the firm place, will give way. It will be sheared off and will fall, and the load hanging on it will be cut down. The Lord has spoken. So when we bring glory and honor to ourselves, just to build ourselves up, it's not a good thing. And God wants the glory to go to him, because we don't have the strength on our own. We don't have the wisdom on our own. We don't have the resources on our own without him. You know, in Psalm 29, I want to just bring light to what God's desire is for us. He says, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. We are called to worship. We are called to bring glory to him. And when we have something great that happens in our lives, we worship him. We give glory to him. Because if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have those things. We wouldn't be able to do those things and to have goodness. And so I want to remind you, all glory goes to God. When something great happens, let's worship him. Let's immediately turn around and help others around us to think about how good he is, how perfect and loving our great God is. And so when we live our lives according to his will, we are living to worship him. As you go through this week, remember that. And until we see you again, church, you are sent.